Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have six articles in this episode for you. All the URLs are in the description of this video for your convenience. The first one here is off of Natural News, and it says, Iowa pipeline, 140,000 gallons of diesel fuel just spilled into the Midwest. Iowa has a sticky situation on its hands with a ruptured pipeline that leaked, according to approximately 140,000 gallons of diesel fuel into farmland on Wednesday, with about a foot of snow already on the ground. Near Hanlantown is owned by Magellan Midstream Partners. Is underway into how the 3,300 barrels of diesel leaked out from the 12-inch, 7-mile-long pipeline. A repair crew reported to the scene sometime after 8 a.m. pipeline break. Reported by the Des Moines Register, an official with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources described the leak as a big one. It's significant. It is Magellan, so they'll have to bear the cost of the cleanup. Enough fuel leaked out to supply 10 gas stations, the official suggested. Although the case of the environmental incident is as yet unknown, a company spokesperson said the leak has been contained, and the Worth County Sheriff indicated that no public health risk is implicated. Evacuations were unnecessary, the sheriff office added. The pipeline runs through 6 Midwestern states as a transport route for multiple refined, NPR noted. Fortunately, the IDR official said the diesel had not reached nearby Willow Creek protection area. As of Wednesday, cleanup crews had already removed about 25,000 gallons of the leaked diesel and contaminated snow diesel mixture, the Globe Gazette explained. The company will also remove the contaminated soil once all the liquid is sucked up. And there's some video in this if you'd like to take a look at that. It says, in an update from the Mason City Globe Gazette, the company claimed yesterday that the overestimated size of the spill, which may not be as bad as originally projected, under the revised assessment, the pipeline break released about 47 gallons of diesel, or 1,115 barrels. Magellan spokesman Bruce Hine said the Tulsa, Oklahoma-based company arrived at Monday's lower estimate when it calculated how much diesel had to be pumped back into the pipeline to get it back online. Magellan reported the revised leak amounts to the Iowa agency and the EPA. Both are on the scene monitoring the cleanup. In October of 2016, a Magellan-operated pipeline in Nebraska carrying anhydrous pneumonia ruptured and ruptured and resulted in the death of one person and the evacuation of neighboring residents. About 7 years ago, Magellan paid $46,200 for Clean Water Act violations elsewhere in Iowa as a result of a diesel spill, as well as a $1,000 fine for an Oklahoma gasoline spill. As previously reported, that diesel exhaust is linked with the growth of cancerous tumors and raises the risk of heart disease. The next article that I have for you is off of foxnews.com, and it says, experts, voter registration system highly susceptible to fraud. Voter registration system is highly susceptible to being compromised because of immigration policies protecting the Golden State's 2.4 million illegal immigrants, authorities have told Fox News. The integrity of elections may be compromised by a lack of oversight since registering and voting, said Hans von Spaxby, Election Law Reform Initiative and senior legal fellow for the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. If you're talking about California, the state is apparently relying on the illegal alien to tell the state that they shouldn't be registered. Honor system, said von Spaxby. The book who's counting, how fraudsters and bureaucrats put your vote at risk. The problem with California is there is no separate verification of citizenship on voter registration, said Charles Bell Jr. with California-based Bell, McAndrews, and Hiltchik, a law firm that specializes in election law. Applicants can check a box affirming they are citizens, checked against any other government database, such as federal immigration records. You have a little map here. It says undocumented immigrant population by state. So if you want to take a look at that, that's right there in the article. It says we have an honor system which is effective for people who are honorable, but is also an opportunity for people who are not honorable, Bell said. There is a gap in the system. Administrative folks who will be aggressive about looking into that. One concern, said Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies for the Washington, D.C.-based Center for Immigration Studies, issues driver licenses to illegal immigrants, allowing them to automatically be registered to vote under the federal motor voter law. Since the AB 60 law went into effect in 2015, 6,000 illegal immigrants have received a license. However, a spokesperson for the California Secretary of State countered that the state law prohibits the Department of Motor Vehicles from sharing AB 60 applicant public, and most state agencies, including the Secretary of State's office, license applicants voter registration opportunities when visiting the DMV. There is no driver's license required to register to vote. There are stiff penalties for illegally voting, said. Even John Podesta, former chairman of the 2016 Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, acknowledged in a leaked email that driver's licenses do provide a loophole. Indeed, one thing I have thought of in that space is that if you show up on election day with a driver's license with a picture of a citizen in federal elections, Podesta wrote in a February 2015 email leaked by WikiLeaks. Trump set off a firestorm when he wrote November 27th tweet that he would have won the country's popular vote. The people who voted illegally hadn't voted. He alleged voter fraud in California, among other states. Trump won the Electoral College vote by nearly 3 million, largely because of California voters. Secretary of State Alex Padilla immediately called Trump's allegations of voter fraud false and unsubstantiated lies without any evidence. Voter fraud won't be tolerated under his administration. Past presidents didn't make election integrity a priority, said Vaughn. The federal government can help local agencies verify citizenship of registered voters, but the Obama administration blocked state and local governments from using the federal verification system. Who served as former special agent in charge for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement investigations in Southern California, Nevada, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota, said this voter fraud firsthand. Throughout my 27-year career with Immigration and Naturalization Service and ICE, I arrested hundreds of illegal criminal aliens who had voter registration cards, Arnold said. They voted, but they were rarely prosecuted for illegally voting. The alleged criminals were registered Democrats, said the person was a registered Republican. There are many advocacy groups that want voter registrations to be simpler. Justice wants automatic voter registration laws to be expanded across the country. The law, which was passed in California, Oregon, Vermont, West Virginia, Connecticut, and Alaska, citizens who interact with government agencies are registered to vote unless they decline to do. Agencies must transfer voter registration information to election officials. The automatic voter registration law could lead to an estimated 6.6 million unregistered voters rolls, the Brennan Center for Justice reported. Automatic voter registration laws create a seamless process that is more convenient and less error-prone for both voters and government officials. Statement. This policy boosts registration rates, cleans up the rolls, makes voting more convenient, and reduces the potential for voter fraud, all while lowering costs. Costs? Made up a word there. While lowering costs. Next article that I have for you is off of globalresearch.ca, and it says EU banking, breakup of European Union, ECB head Mario Draghi. Draghi's speech at an investment conference in London boosted markets at the time, down Spain and Italy's borrowing costs, after saying, within our mandate, the ECB is ready to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro, and believe me, it will be enough. The markets responded because they were effectively being manipulated. Known as outright monetary transactions, the scheme was to have been deployed alongside a QE program from March 2015 itself, racking up 80 billion a month. Several trillion euros later, and the EU looks as precarious as ever, with growth a distant memory. In Italy, yields on bonds dropped from 6.3% to 1.2% after that famous speech, and all seemed good on the face of it. It was not as we had been led to believe. Italy's government debt grew and is now equal to 33% of GDP. When Ireland imploded and had to be fully bailed out by the ECB, the debt pile was 132.2% of GDP. With all this intervention, the ECB's balance sheet ballooned, set to overtake the U.S. Federal Reserve, and has now reached over $3 trillion, according to Bank of America's Merrill Lynch, not to be confused with national debt. Off the mainstream media radar came the news that another Italian bank had disintegrated, and while attention was focused on the rescue of Banca Monte dei Paschi di Siena, which is still not fully finalized, news came that Banca has quietly slipped into bankruptcy. It was announced December the 21st that the first part of an investigation concerning fraudulent bankruptcy charges at Banca Utria, in which 21 board members are implicated, had been closed. This strand of the investigation concerns 180 million loans offered by the bank, which were never paid back, leading to the regional lender's bankruptcy and eventual bailout last November that left bank or bondholders holding virtually worthless bonds. Out of the blue comes UniCredit, the country's largest bank. It is seeking to raise 13 billion euros of desperately needed capital, but large as though this is, the biggest problem, according to the FT, is that the smaller banks like Banca Utria are now in a perilous position, on the verge of falling over the cliff edge. Italy has banks on every street corner, with more branches per capita than any other OECD country. The lack of growth occurred since the joint euro has suppressed much needed profits on the one hand, whilst seeing poor wage growth on the other, causing drastically increased non-performing loans that now add up to an eye-watering 360 billion euros. Reports that Italian banks have long sold their own shares and debt to their retail customers as attractive alternative to savings products, a disgraced practice that should have never been allowed. Italians, many in retirement, have already suffered as bank shares have fallen. They will suffer much more in a bail-in. The FT is suggesting that a full bail-in is on the cards. It is. Republica reported back in September that banks throughout the EU would simply steal depositors' money if any of them failed now that the new bail-in rules have been implemented, and that is exactly what is happening. All this is that Mario Draghi, clearly feeling the strain, has finally admitted defeat and said that there is a strong possibility of the EU falling apart. The tactic to keep unity was to threaten in the EU by stating that leaving the European or the Eurozone would cost dearly a member country to settle its claims or debts with the bloc's payment system before severing ties. There's nothing to stop a desperate member country from leaving. According to Armstrong Economics, this statement reveals the heated discussion that Davos and the rift that is being spread. Draghi's statement was made in a letter to two Italian lawmakers in the European Parliament. Himself says Southern Europe, which are the weaker economics, including Italy, Spain, and Greece, have accumulated huge liabilities to keep the euro afloat, while Germany stands out as the biggest creditor with the net of 754.1 billion euros. This alone may set off the massive capital flight of the dollar. At the complete collapse of the quantitative easing carried out by the ECB since 2008 without any success. German Minister for Economic Affairs Sigmar Gabriel, Social Democrat in Angela Merkel's government, also warned last week of the EU that the EU could fall apart if populists in France and the Netherlands win national elections later this year. So convinced are the aides to the U.S. President Donald Trump that the EU is on the verge of bankrupt or breakup that they recently asked EU officials over the phone which countries will be next to leave the bloc after Britain. The man tipped to be Donald Trump's ambassador to the European Union has told the BBC single currency in the next 18 months. Even the creator of the euro, Professor Otmar, has predicted that Brussels' dream of European superstate will finally be buried amongst the rubble of the crumbling single currency he designed, accusing bureaucrats and German leader Angela Merkel of being the principles of the euro and demonstrating scandalous incompetence over its management. At Mario Draghi's failing monetary policy. Economists, commentators, experts, and pundits are now divided when it comes to the survival prospects of the euro in the near term, and even the fact alone has considerably worsened since last year. With the head of the ECB, Mario Draghi, an eventual breakup is a probability that is that much higher than previously ever imagined. We need to be paying very close attention to that because the economies are failing all around the world. And they go, so goes ours. Have for you is off of Girls Just Want to Have Guns, and it says fake news strikes again. Died due to Trump ban lied about the whole thing. Twitter with their outrage over this mother's death. Embarrassment when it was learned that the whole story was a lie. Tweets down, poor liberals falling or for fake news again. And it says an Iraqi-American man who made headlines earlier this week by claiming that his ailing mother had died because of President Donald Trump's executive order on immigration lied, according to the imam of his local mosque. Detroit's Fox 2. The original story was that Mike Hager, a U.S. citizen born in Iraq, was visiting relatives in Iraq, but was forced to abandon his mother in that country when he tried to return home. Hager said he was returning home with his family. That included his sick mom. They were returning home to the United States where his mother has lived since 1995. As they were waiting in line at the airport in Iraq on Friday, he was told that he could pass through because he was a U.S. citizen, but his family members, including his mom, weren't allowed despite holding a green card. Shocked. I had put my mom back on the wheelchair to take her back and call the ambulance, and she was very, very upset. She knew right there, if we send her back to the hospital, she's going to pass away. She's not going to make it, Hager said. Sadly, he was right. Namama, who lived in the United States since 1995, wasn't allowed to come home, and he said she died in her native country. For the order, his mom would still be alive today. He blames her death on President Trump. And then there is a tweet from Harez.com. It says, man who claimed mother died in Iraq after the Trump ban lied. Son originally said she has been barred from boarding a plane to the U.S. from Iraq where she had been, and then it trails off. And let's see, it finishes up by saying a leader of the mosque in Dearborn has confirmed to Fox 2 that the man who claimed his mother died in Iraq after being barred from returning to the United States under a ban instituted by President Trump this week and lied to Fox 2 about Kurd. Imam Hisham al-Hassani, leader of the Karabala Islamic Educational Center in Dearborn, says Mike Hager's mom did not pass away this weekend after being barred from traveling to the United States. The imam confirms that Hager's mother died before the ban was put in place. Aired on Fox 2 and was posted on fox2detroit.com. We received many questions about the validity of Hager's claims that his mother died waiting to be approved to come home. Fox 2 has confirmed that his mother died 5 days earlier. What some people won't pull. Can't make this stuff up. The next one here is off of globalresearch.ca, and it says, guess who's moving factories to America to lower costs? China seeks a Made in America label. Speaks about the barriers that U.S. companies face. He often mentions a high corporate tax rate and the ability of other countries to produce more cheaply, which is most often draws Trump's ire for doing so, is now facing many of the same problems. In fact, in one case that attracted a lot of attention in China, an executive said it is more profitable for his company to produce goods in the U.S. than domestically. The label Made in China has long been associated with bulk goods manufactured cheaply in Asia, but even as Trump rails about China, still produce products there. China's dominant role as the world's factory is already eroding. This is not because of fierce competition from countries with even lower production costs, but because its companies are facing structural problems which are a drag on the domestic manufacturing sector. Taxes on manufacturing, for example, can be up to 35% higher in China than in the U.S. Cho-Tak Wong, founder and chairman of China's largest auto glass manufacturer, told the Chinese business publication Yisai in December. The interview attracted a lot of attention in China, with many business leaders echoing his sentiments. In particular, they complained about taxation and brought up other cost issues that are making the lives of Chinese manufacturers harder. Chow noted that of all these reasons now make it more profitable for produce goods in the U.S. instead of manufacturing them in China and exporting them. And he has put his money where his mouth is. $750 million in the U.S. since 2014, including launching 2 factories in Illinois and Ohio. Faygo Glass plans to open a 3rd American plant in Michigan this year. Investment in the U.S. to a total of $1 billion, Rutgers reported. Speaking of other costs of his U.S. factories, Chow said in the video, land is basically free. The price of electricity is half of that in China, and the natural gas price is only 1/5. In the U.S., Chow estimated that the profit is 10% higher by manufacturing there instead of exporting the same goods from China. He listed taxes, utilities, and tariffs contributing to his calculation. Chow attributed the higher taxes to China's value-added tax, or the VAT system. This only imposes taxes on companies' income. Chinese government collects taxes on income as well as each phase of the product circulation in the market, from buying to processing to reselling. Manufacturers who turn raw materials into finished goods, the VAT is usually 17% of the value added. To counter Chou's complaints, Chinese government has pointed out that it launched a tax reform scheme beginning in 2011. Its purpose is to gradually cancel the business tax on revenues. These new policies have cost the government about $17 billion in lost taxes from the manufacturing industry between May and November of last year. Xi, Minister of Finance, only about 15%, or no, that's wrong, only about 1.5%, there we go, of the taxpayers saw an actual increase in taxes under the new policy, Zhao added. As the cooling economy makes it harder to generate profits, a manufacturer's willingness to tolerate these taxes is reduced, as the extent of the tax cut does not make up for the lower profit. Chinese economist Bai Haiying told businesses capacity to afford taxes is being weakened by oversupply, higher labor costs, lower added value, and thinner profits in the market, as well as the hit of technology innovations like robots in the labor-intensive manufacturing industry, said Bai Haiying, partner of or at Beijing-based certified tax agents company. The modest tax reform implemented by the Chinese government stands in stark contrast to the plans offered by Trump on the campaign trail and the Republican-led House. Proposed to cut the corporate tax rate to 15%, while some House Republicans want to see it reduced even more. Lowering our effective marginal corporate tax rate from its current value of 30%, if not higher, to 0%, as proposed in the House tax plan, will make the U.S. most tax-attractive developed country in which to invest. Lawrence Kotohoff, an economics professor at Boston University, told Who What Why. The possibility of more restrictions on U.S.-China trade is definitely racking the nerves of Chinese manufacturers. Part of what makes it more profitable is to produce in the U.S. or ask and other manufacturers as incentives offered by local governments. In Ohio, for example, the company received a package of benefits that was worth $30 million and offset the $15 million it spent to purchase the 1.6 million square foot facility in Ohio, and another $15 million in construction costs, Chow said in an interview with Xinhua. He's added about 1,700 manufacturing jobs in the U.S., according to Fioglass website. It must be noted, however, that Fioglass could not have built a facility in the U.S. without the approval of the Chinese regulators, including the Ministry of Commerce and the National Development and Reform Commission. Chinese leaders see a benefit in moving some production plants out of the country, which is a stark contrast to Trump's protectionist America First approach. These Chinese government's policies support some manufacturers like FAO to increase their competitiveness by better collaborating with foreign players such as General Motors in this case, Voss said. General Motors had encouraged Fioglass to move some production facilities to the U.S. in order to lower costs. This is one example of a Chinese company bringing jobs to the U.S. However, it is unlikely to dissuade Trump from taking a tough line against China, even though economists say that the availability of cheaper labor elsewhere is not that critical in explaining the decrease of manufacturing jobs in the U.S. As in other countries, the largest problem is the number of jobs deprived because of technological improvements. A co-director of the University of Pennsylvania Center for Tax Law and Policy told Who What Why. Studies have found that the U.S. manufacturing lost 5.6 million jobs between 2000 and 2010, but only 13% of the loss resulted from international trade. That was attributed to automation, according to the Financial Times. These facts and China's investments in the U.S. might not prevent Trump, who has accused China of taking American jobs and manipulating its currency, from starting a trade war between the world's two biggest economies. Some short-term benefits for the U.S., it would likely harm both countries in the end. I think President Trump's apparent decision to start a trade war with China and accuse it of currency manipulation is an enormous mistake made by someone with no training in economics, said Kotikoff from the Boston University. The next article that I have is off of Conservative, and it says California. History teacher canned for displaying USA and Confederate flags while teaching about the Civil War. Scroll up here a little bit. It's off. There we go. Try this again. Confederate battle flag kerfuffle. Not only is the rewriting of history moving forward full steam ahead, the PC Gestapo conditioning of the nation's children at government-run schools are squashing anyone whose heterodox teaching methods rock the status quo boat. American thinker Steve Bias, in government at Randall University in Moore, Oklahoma, 70-year-old U.S. history teacher Woody Hart of Rancho Cordova was forced to submit his request for retirement. The catalyst for Hart's forced retirement? Displaying an 1865 period U.S. flag as well as the Confederate battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia in his class. In 1965 Union and Confederate flags in Hart's classroom. He just so happened to be teaching his students of the presentness, as particularly reported by Bias. Personally, my favorite teacher in the whole school, Anna nicely told CBS Sacramento in reference to a middle school American history teacher, Woody Hart, in Rancho Cordova, California, who was forced to retire by the Board of Education. 70-year-old teacher at Settle Middle School of the Folsom Cordova United School District was ousted after using a Confederate battle flag along with a period United States flag as part of a lesson on the U.S. Civil War. The school superintendent, Deborah Betancourt, released a statement late last week that the Board of Education had accepted school teachers' retirement and he will not be returning to school this year. In an interview with the local CBS affiliate, Anna Nisley, one of Hart's students, explained what had happened. She saw the Union flag on one side of the room and the Confederate flag on the other side of the room. Apparently, this was typical of the way Hart taught. I actually hated the way he taught history. I felt that we were getting more involved than other classes did. For example, Hart used of the opposing sides in the Civil War to create interest. The two hanging flags were part of Hart's lesson, were members of one of two armies. Nisley added that she did not understand why Hart's display of one of the two sides involved was controversial, considering that the flags, including the Confederate flag, are also used in the textbook for the same purpose. Back in November, a black filed a complaint against Hart for his remarks in which he explained the unfair way blacks were treated during segregation. Hart told his students that at one time some Southerners responded to calls for black equality with disdain, saying terrible things such as, "We treat all black people equally, we hang them all." Chapter of the group, calling itself Showing Up for Racial Injustice, also weighed in, demanding a public apology from Hart. Apparently, Hart was only relating historical incidents in which people went during those days to promote better treatment and equal rights for blacks, only to be told that they do treat blacks equally. They hang them if they are in-state African Americans, and they hang them African Americans. Hart was simply telling the students how terribly blacks were treated during that time. And with the Confederate battle flag, Hart was teaching his class accurate history as to the use of the flag in battles during the Civil War. He argued that it did not really matter how the flag was used during the Civil War. It should not be seen by students today. We recognize that regardless of context, to many of our students, families, and staff, the Confederate flag is a racist symbol of hate. Although this matter is under investigation, it is important to reiterate any employee who is found to engage in behavior that creates an unsafe environment for students will face full consequences, including the possibility of initiating termination proceedings. The superintendent said that the district's action did not mean that they were attempting to limit free speech of our teachers. Then, in an Orwellian, she stated that she expects teachers and staff will do this work using culturally appropriate strategies. The district statement added, "It is our school's responsibility to provide safe learning environment for all children." It is not clear how the display of a flag, which was actually used in many battles during the American Civil War, create an unsafe learning environment for children, and exactly what is meant by culturally appropriate strategies. The obvious meaning is that certain events and symbols in history are to be censored, or as George Orwell described it in his dystopian novel in 1984, some things should be disposed of in memory hole. Among those things that should be relegated to the memory hole and not even shown to students because it apparently would make them unsafe, battle flag. Since the murders inside a church in South Carolina, in which killer posted photographs of himself on Facebook along with the flag, there has been an intense offensive against any public display of the historical flag. Action by this school district raises the question of whether we are to censor history and eliminate and symbols from our collective memory, convey history as it was, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because to do otherwise is simply telling a lie. Study history is to learn lessons from the collective memory of the human race, both the living and the dead. If certain things are to be excluded from that collective memory, we have crippled ourselves from using the study of history in its proper way. Today, it's the Confederate battle flag, which is to be blotted out from the historical record because its detractors argue that it has been racist, such as the KKK. Actually, if one examines photographs of the Klan rallies, more United States flags are used than Confederate battle flags. And what are we to do with the Klan practice of burning a cross on someone's lawn? Should the Christian cross be consigned to oblivion as well? One suspects there are many who would like to do so, using whatever excuse they can. And prime example of the establishment media flat out pushing fake news, the Sacramento CBS affiliate put their own spin on the false or the faux. This is the second time Hart is facing racially charged allegations stemming from classroom lesson. In November, parents from teen, after they say Hart made remarks during the lesson about equality, saying if you were to hang one black person, you would have to hang all black people. To the remarks, in part because their son was the only black student in the classroom. this stuff up, folks. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. If I get any breaking news or special editions, I'll be sure and bring them out to you, but this is all I have for the moment. If you enjoy what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up and let me know. Don't forget to share it on your social media and be sure and subscribe. Have a great day.